The Denver Nuggets just dominated Game 1 of the 2023 NBA Finals as the Heat struggled to shoot the ball from outside, and the Nuggets' two-man game of Murray and Jokic was firing on all cylinders for most of the game today. The Nuggets had a very obvious game plan to get out in transition and tire out the Heat players who have a smaller bench rotation and are still adjusting to that Denver altitude, though really I don't think it played that much of a role tonight because the Heat didn't look particularly gassed, at least more than usual. To kick us off, Aaron Gordon had a quick 8 points to start off the game, making the Heat pay for playing such a small lineup with Bam at center. And the problem the Heat ran into because of Aaron Gordon dominating the paint to start off this game is the fact that they don't have anyone else to turn to. They have Bam, and that's it. Are you going to play Kevin Love? No, because Kevin Love isn't staying in front of Aaron Gordon. Are you going to play Cody Zeller? No, because you can't play Bam and Cody Zeller at the same time because they're both non-shooters. Plus, we watched Cody Zeller play some minutes tonight. He just got ran over by Jokic. And despite all the pressure of being pretty much the entirety of the Heat's front court presence, Bam was great tonight. He was their best player. In the first half, he was 8 for 10 from the floor with 16 points and 4 rebounds, but the Heat were still down 17 at halftime. This was mostly because Jamal Murray was doing Jamal Murray things. He was 8 for 12 on the floor as well with 18, 4, and 4. Jokic had a double-double at halftime with 10 points and 10 assists, and Michael Porter Jr. also had 10 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks. And I wish I just had like 10% of Porter Jr.'s confidence in life, bro. I'd be doing great things at this point. That man just lets it fly every single time he touches the damn ball, and I know I've talked about it before, but I just love watching it. It's objectively terrible basketball until you realize he's 6'10 and just shoots over everyone. Those guards, Max Strus or Caleb Martin getting in his face doesn't faze him at all. And what was interesting about the defensive schemes tonight was the fact that the Denver Nuggets kind of took a page out of the Miami Heat playbook in that they kind of just let Jokic roam in the middle of the court. With Jokic on the floor, the Denver Nuggets were playing this sort of pseudo zone where Nikola Jokic was up and around the elbows or down by the blocks, just around the paint in general. And because he's such a large body in the paint, whenever Miami Heat players drove, like let's say, for example, Jimmy drove, which I feel like this sort of defense kind of led to Jimmy Butler not having a very good game tonight. But when he drove, he felt like he had to kick out. So he kicked the ball out to Max Strus or Caleb Martin, and then there was a contest from one of the Nuggets players way quicker than there would have been if they were just playing a normal man defense. And I think this sort of pseudo zone that the Nuggets were playing was the key to why Max Strus was terrible tonight. And also part of it was on Max Strus. He had a couple wide open threes that he just bricked. I'm talking shuffled his feet and found the seams of the ball and still shot it short threes. And after I made a case of Caleb Martin being the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, he was absolutely non-existent tonight. He shot 14% from the field, made one shot. It was a 3. And I feel like it was because the Nuggets were all up in his face and being difficult with him and being physical. It wasn't anything he hasn't seen before, but for some reason, whatever the Nuggets were doing, which I think was this pseudo zone, was totally throwing him off. And it's also possible that the Miami Heat just had a bad shooting night and it really wasn't anything to do with the Denver Nuggets defense. Like that is also totally possible. I mean, they were 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 shots away from being in this game down the stretch. Specifically, Strus or Martin, if one of them hit threes at their average clip, realistically, this is a close game with about 5 minutes left. I'm talking like a 2 to 3 point game with like 3, 4, 5 minutes left, but because it wasn't, the Nuggets were able to slow the pace way down and it was just way too late for the Heat to make a comeback. And they tried to make a comeback. They started off the fourth back into their zone and stopping that Jokic-Murray two-man game that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, and that's been killing every team the Nuggets have played in the playoffs this year. And it worked. They started off the fourth quarter with an 11-0 run that brought them back to within 14, which is crazy to say. It might have been 12, it might have been 10, but they definitely brought it to within 9 at some point. But then Denver settled down and Jamal Murray was finding Nikola Jokic in that high post elbow area, and he was just orchestrating from there, even through a double team, and it worked. And then they started getting out in transition again, and Jamal Murray hit a couple tough turnaround 2-pointers in the mid-range, and that was pretty much the game. And will I say that this series is over? It's one game. It's not that big of a deal, but the Nuggets definitely looked like the better team, and we knew that going into this series, but it's possible that the return of Tyler Hero in Game 2 gives the Heat the lift that they needed. But an interesting stat just to keep track of is the fact that the Heat have won game 1 of every single series that they've played in the playoffs this year. They beat the Bucks in game 1, the Knicks, and the Celtics. Just because they lost game 1 doesn't mean that this series is over, but it is a pattern that was happening, and it is something to make note of if the Heat lose and go down 2-0 going back to Miami. I have absolutely no doubt that there will be closer games in this series. Erik Spoelstra is not letting this team go down 4-0. It's just not happening. And Jimmy Butler is going to play a better game on Sunday. He looked a little gassed towards the end of this game. He had, 16 points? And it was a really non-existent 16 points. Not even 16. He had 13. But what was important about this game is the return of Bam Adebayo and his confidence. He shot pretty well from the field, 13 for 25. It's nothing to write home about, but at some point he was shooting 8 for 12 at halftime, like I said earlier, and he had an efficient 26 points and 13 rebounds, and the Heat are going to need it. Another storyline of this series was the fact that Haywood Highsmith came off the bench and shot 7 for 10 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3, and had 18 points in 23 minutes. Honestly, he brought a lot of much-needed energy for the Heat, especially at the beginning of the fourth when they were making that sort of comeback, and we haven't seen a whole lot of Highsmith this entire playoffs. Highsmith played a little bit in the Celtics series, but he wasn't particularly good on the offensive end. He was just kind of a pest for the guards of the Celtics. But he goes out there and he hustles and he makes the right plays. And tonight he had 18 points, so you can't really argue with his production. And honestly, if you're looking to bench Max Strus, which I don't think the Heat should quite yet, but if you're looking to bench him, I would start Highsmith before I start Duncan Robinson. Just because Highsmith brings a whole lot of defensive energy and was hitting his threes when he was open. So if you can get his 3-point production from the corners and also have him pestering Jamal Murray and making him tired earlier in the game, that could be beneficial. Don't get me wrong, Duncan Robinson was very good in the Eastern Conference Finals, at least for the player he was in the regular season. He was hitting his threes outside of Game 6, and then he was getting backdoor cuts, which ended up in layups, or he was playmaking off the dribble, which we haven't really seen him do. But today, nothing was falling from 3, and also he wasn't doing much else. So anyway, the game plan for the Heat really should not change. They held the Nuggets to 104 points and essentially under 100 points before garbage time. If you take that defensive scheme and also factor in the fact that you only shot 1 for 3 from 3 tonight, 33.3%, if you play the defense you played tonight, add a couple more 3-pointers in, then it's a close game down the stretch and you give yourself a chance. Especially now that you have 2 more days to rest and get prepared for the game on Sunday. I don't think the Heat are out yet. Obviously, it's only one game. I wouldn't freak out. Denver is obviously the better team. I don't think anyone's going to make an argument about that. But just because they're the better team doesn't mean they're going to win the series. We obviously saw that with the Eastern Conference Finals. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. The Heat are not down and out yet, but it was a sound win by the Nuggets. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got. Have a good one.
He's amazing athlete, first of all, and then he's moving his feet well. He's long, so I'm not going to say. So close.